This video provides methods to analyze the difference between two datasets that describe a mutual set of categories. We compute component intensity, which facilitates comparison of each category with other categories and with difference overall. We thank the National Science Foundation and the Edna Bailey Sussman Trust for funding this video. Previous work by Pontius and Santacruz showed how to compute difference size for a categorical variable as the sum of three components: quantity, exchange, and shift. See the video linked in the description box for more information on these three components. Here, we show an example of all three components with an application to change analysis. This figure represents pixels within a map at time 1 and 2. There are three categories at both time points: A, represented by red, B, by yellow, and C, by blue. The upper right corner shows a contingency table, which summarizes the category transitions from time 1 to 2. For this change analysis, we refer to this table as a transition matrix. From the total column of the calculating components of difference table, we see the number of pixels of change for each category. A is involved in 3 pixels of change. There is 1 pixel of A at time 1 and 2 pixels of A at time 2. Thus, there is 1 pixel of quantity difference. The other 2 pixels of change for A are the result of exchange, as A transitions to B while B transitions to A. B is involved in 3 pixels of change. There are 2 pixels of B at time 1 and 1 pixel of B at time 2, resulting in a quantity difference of 1. The remaining 2 pixels of change for B are due to exchange, as B transitions to A while A transitions to B. C is involved in 2 pixels of change. There is 1 pixel of C at both time points, so that the quantity component is 0. There is 0 exchange for C because C transitions to A, but A does not transition to C, and B transitions to C, but C does not transition to B. Therefore, the 2 pixels of difference for C are due to shift, because shift is the remaining component of difference that is neither quantity nor exchange. This row double counts the overall change because each transition involved a losing category and a gaining category. The overall row at the bottom row of this table is 1/2 the total row because change involves both a gaining and a losing category. A quarter of overall difference is quantity, a half overall is exchange, and a quarter overall is shift. This slide shows the size of components of difference for each category in terms of number of pixels. The positive sign means a category experiences net gain. The negative sign means a category experiences net loss. The size of each category's component in this figure is proportional to how much each category contributes to the size of that component overall. In this example, the size of the total difference for C is smaller than that for A or B, as the lengths of the bars differ, which can hinder a comparison of components among categories. This motivates the desire to compute component intensities that evaluate how intensively each category experiences each component relative to the size of that category's total difference. This figure shows component intensities standardized by total difference for each category. This figure allows us to compare the relative impact that each component expresses for each category. The uniform quantity line indicates that the quantity component overall is 25% of the difference overall. If the quantity component for a given category extends beyond the line for uniform quantity, then the category has experienced quantity component more intensively than overall quantity component. For example, the quantity components for categories A and B extend beyond the line for uniform quantity, so both categories A and B experienced quantity components more intensively relative to the quantity component overall. On the contrary, if the quantity component does not extend beyond the line for uniform quantity, then the category has a quantity component less intensive relative to the quantity component overall, such as in the case of category C. There is no quantity bar for category C because category C experienced 0 quantity change. The uniform quantity plus exchange line indicates that the sum of quantity and exchange components overall is 75% of the difference overall. The difference between the lines is 50%, which equals the intensity of exchange overall. Categories A and B have exchange components that are more intensive than uniform exchange, while category C has 0 exchange. The uniform quantity plus exchange line of 75% implies that the intensity of shift overall is 25%, calculated as 100% minus 75%. Category C has a shift component that is more intensive than shift overall, as category C entire bar is shift. We will now demonstrate these principles of component intensities to compare differences by a category and overall with a case study using a marsh which is part of the Plum Island Ecosystem's long-term ecological research site located in northeastern Massachusetts. The data derived from remotely sensed images at 2 time points, 2005 and 2013. Each time point has 4 categories: Alterna flora, patents, water, and bear. Alterna flora and patents are 2 types of Spartina, which are cord grasses that can be challenging to distinguish using remote sensing. Black polygons show contiguous patches of temporal difference. Each patch of temporal difference involves 2 categories, a losing category and a gaining category. Each pixel has a spatial resolution of half a meter. Therefore, misregistration error of more than half a meter can cause differences between the maps at 2005 and 2013, even when the change on the ground does not really exist. The western side of the spatial extent shows linear features, which are drainage ditches. Those ditches contain Alterna flora surrounded by patents at both time points. The ditches appear to move south between 2005 and 2013, which is likely due to image misregistration. These maps show the same spatial extent as the previous slide, but shades of gray here show persistence. Thus, the non-gray colors show the losses from 2005 and gains from 2013. These maps show that Alterna flora loses more than it gains, while the other categories gain more than they lose. Therefore, the quantity components show net loss for Alterna flora and net gain for other categories. Exchange occurs between Alterna flora and patents, as Alterna flora loses to patents while patents gains from Alterna flora in a regular pattern immediately to the south, again likely to result in misregistration. It can be helpful to distinguish exchange from other components of difference because exchange can alert scientists to systematic errors that cause confusion of 2 categories with one another. Common causes of exchange are errors due to misregistration and misclassification. In contrast, Bear illustrates how shift is distinct from exchange. Bear has an intensive shift component, as Bear loses to water in the southwest corner, while Bear gains mostly from Alterna flora and patents in the northeastern corner of the spatial extent. Figure A on the left shows that Alterna flora and patents account for the largest differences, and that their exchange components are the largest of the 3 components. The exchange between Alterna flora and patents accounts for half of overall difference. Figure B facilitates comparison among categories by presenting intensities by category and overall. The quantity overall line indicates that quantity overall accounts for 31% of difference overall. Intensity of exchange overall is the quantity plus exchange overall line minus the quantity overall line, which implies that exchange accounts for 56% of difference overall. The quantity plus exchange overall line implies that shift accounts for 13% of difference overall. The quantity component for Bear is smallest in size, but it is more intensive than that of Alterna flora or patents. Patents does not have the smallest quantity component size, yet patents is the only category that has a quantity component less intensive than quantity overall. The exchange component for Alterna flora is the same size as it is for patents, but patents is the only category that has an exchange component more intensive than the exchange overall. Patents and Bear have positive shift components, both of which are more intensive than shift overall. Some components reveal patterns that are not immediately obvious in the maps. For example, patents has a shift component because patents gains from Alterna flora more than patents loses to Alterna flora, while patents loses to water and Bear more than patents gains from water and Bear. We present a procedure to compute the intensity of a component as the size of the component divided by the size of the difference. Comparison of intensities facilitates comparison among categories that have various sizes of differences. Readers can use the R software package diff-R to compute the sizes of the components. Readers can also compute both sizes and intensities of components by entering their sample matrix into the Pontius matrix spreadsheet, which can be obtained for free from Professor Pontius' website. Here is our contact information. Please see more videos at the website of Professor Pontius.